Hey, Bastich B for 64K, and welcome to another episode of Shoot 'em Up Decades. And welcome back. So if you've never watched this show before, I take a look at 3 different shoot 'em ups from 3 different decades, and I tell you why I like them and why I've included them in this video. So let's not waste any more time and head on over to the 1980s. X-Out was released in 1989 by Rainbow Arts on the Commodore 64. Rainbow Arts were formed in 1984 in Gütersloh, Germany. They started primarily making games for the C64 before branching out later into Amiga and PC territory, although their most memorable stuff is definitely on Commodore's 8 and 16-bit machines. A lot of Europe's most talented programmers and musicians also worked there at some point or another, including musician Chris Hulsbeck and programmers Manfred Trenz and Julian Egelbrecht, and those are just a few of the many talents. X-Out was a game that was in their wheelhouse, the shoot 'em up genre, which they had perfected with 88's Catechus and their brilliant C64 conversion of R-Type. X-Out was in safe hands. It was a massive 8-level horizontal shooter that took place underwater, which was quite unusual as 90% of shoot 'em ups were either in space or sky-based affairs. The story has aliens invade Earth from a wormhole under the sea, and they send you, of course, a one-man submarine pilot to wipe them out. On the surface, X-Out is your standard shooter with bosses and mid-bosses, charge shot and secondary weapons, but it's the ship selection and customization of the weapons which is the real treat here. You can buy multiple different subs and the weapon selection is fantastic. From drones, multi-fire, shields, guided missiles, you name it, X-Out has it. And the best part is being able to equip it to any part of your ship, almost changing the way you can actually use them. The combinations and variety is immense and gives the game an added layer of strategy. After each level, you can also stop by here and spend your hard-earned money and can tailor-make your ship for each new stage, which is where the strategy comes in, and sell old equipment for cash. After the brilliant intro sequence, each level is a well-crafted blast to the finish. The bosses are particularly impressive, and the game does suffer from some sprite flickering here and there when things get hectic, but it's not enough to ruin the gameplay outright. The sound effects are really good, and those Sid tunes by Michael Hendricks are absolute rockers. In fact, the sound effects and music are played simultaneously, which really boosts the atmosphere. The graphics are pure Andreas Escher, the man that gave us Catechus and Turrican 2's visual feasts. It's not in the league of either of those. It sits somewhere in the middle, but the really small designs of the ships and enemies and the variety of the levels, from sea trenches to ice caves and alien hives, is still all pretty impressive overall. Zap64 back in the May 1990 issue gave the C64 version 82% overall, saying a first-class shoot 'em up. And it's definitely an 8-bit shooter that doesn't get the recognition it deserves. And with the 1980s done, my next stop is the 1990s. Harmful Park was released in 1997 by Skythink Systems. They were a Japanese software company that made educational software, but in the late 90s decided to try their hand at a couple of games. They put out 2 on the PS1, namely Kururin-Pai, a puzzle game, and Harmful Park, a shoot 'em up. And for a company that was simply dipping their toes into something they knew nothing about, the end results are extremely impressive. This for me is one of the most underrated PS1 games out there, and is a grand old shoot 'em up in the style of Konami's Parodius series. In fact, the first time I saw this game in a now defunct Japanese import gaming shop, I thought it was part of that series. The game has some nutcase take over an amusement park and take everyone hostage. 2 sisters are sent in to get the place sorted, and the game can be played in 1 or 2 player co-op mode. If this subgenre of shooter is new to you, the shoot 'em up style is simply a standard shooter where everything has been made cute. From characters, enemies, upgrades, and the setting, with the colors usually amped up to the max. physics. Harmful Park does not disappoint on any level. The power-ups or weapons are totally bizarre, from throwing pies to laser shooting ice cream, and the bosses are pretty imaginative, from blow-up dinosaurs, cow trains, demented pumpkin heads, and giant raver girls shooting strawberries. Yes, you heard that right. The music is just as in sync with the retro madness, from bubbly cute ditties to massive orchestral set pieces. They perfectly match the madness of each new stage design. It's also a great entry-level shoot-'em-up to try, as the game is quite honestly a walk in the park as far as difficulty goes. Besides some mid and end bosses, which are a bit of a challenge, the rest is pretty smooth sailing. With 6 stages in total, you're still going to have plenty of game to play though. There are also 3 multiplayer minigames you can select from the menu to play separately, featuring the sisters in a Windjammers style game, a fast-paced type scrolling racer, and an ode to Atari's tank game, which is honestly a crazy amount of extra content to get as a bonus. Both this game and Kururin Pai sold extremely poorly in Japan upon release, and made the company abandon video gaming altogether and go back to corporate and educational software once again. Despite that, it's a wonderful game that, besides the cutscenes which are in Japanese but don't impede the enjoyment of the game, it's really accessible for anyone wanting to try out this crazy subgenre of shooter, and is an excellent example of the PS1 just being as capable as the Saturn in terms of producing a real quality 2D arcade style experience.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
And now on over to the 2010s for our final game of today. Crimson Clover World Ignition was released in 2014 by Yotsubane. It's the third out of 4 versions of this game that's been released. The original 2011 version was released at Comiket, a Japanese convention devoted to independent self-published works. An arcade version hit in 2013, with World Ignition, the version we're looking at here on PC, being the combo of everything here in one package. There is also a Switch 2020 version if you prefer to keep your shooters on console or portable. Crimson Clover itself is a vertical bullet hell Japanese shoot-'em-up extravaganza that's an absolute feast for your eyes and ears. You first get to choose between 4 different ships, each with varying speed and refill meters. Then it's off to the shoot-'em-up action. Your mission is to shoot your way through to an enemy base who is making a world-ending doomsday weapon called the Crimson Heart. If you're not used to this style of Japanese bullet hell game, like the ones made by K for example, then this is going to be a real eye-opening experience in terms of sheer on-screen destruction and your ability to dodge 1,000 bullets that are incoming on your location. But it's not as hard as it initially looks. There are patterns and almost rhythms in these types of games that make even the most insane situation possible to survive, and Crimson Clover is no exception. You have a regular shot and a lock-on Panzer Dragoon style feature that launches missiles at everything currently locked on, up to 16 initially, and a break gauge which fills up and once unleashed gives you a brief bout of immortality and increased speed and shot power. And to make it even more insane, multiple breaks can be stacked on top of each other for all-out mass destruction. If you're not used to this style of shooter, it does come with 3 different difficulties, which vary things up enough to ease you into it. The visuals are absolutely beautiful, with a relentless pace and awesome bosses to take out. The sound effects are absolutely spot on and feature some very cool 90s arcade tunes that unfortunately get a little drowned out with all the explosion sounds though. Overall, the gameplay is tight. It's great for beginners to the genre, and a must-play shooter of this decade. Okay, so why did I choose X-Out? I think that X-Out is just a pretty overlooked 8-bit shoot-'em-up by Rainbow Arts. A lot of the other shoot-'em-ups are celebrated in the old-school computer world, but X-Out is kind of always gets left out a bit. What I like about that game the most though is the customization. Like I mentioned in the review, you can really customize your ship it's extremely diverse, and it can make such a big difference to how the game actually plays and how you can tackle a level. It's really robust, and it's one of the most robust, setups for a spaceship in any kind of shoot 'em up, especially on 8-bit computers, and I just really love it. Harmful Park on the PS1 or PSX is extremely underrated. It's kind of like a lost Parodius game. You can think of it that way. If you love that series by Konami, then this is just absolutely awesome. I can't believe this game was never brought over to the West. It's such a shame. It delivers everything you want in a cute 'em up. It's got awesome music, excellent graphics, great level design, awesome enemies and boss encounters, and it's also pretty easy to play. So it's definitely a one for somebody that wants to try out that kind of genre of shoot 'em up for the first time. And the final game I chose was Clover World Ignition, an absolutely awesome independent bullet hell Japanese shooter. The reason I chose this one is similar to Harmful Park. It's a little bit of an easier bullet hell game to get into. So if you want to try out this genre again for the first time, it's also just packs on the action without messing around. It really makes you feel like you're invincible as you go around just blasting everything on screen. It's pretty easy in the beginning, so it definitely eases you into it. It gets much harder later, so beware. But again, this is another one that kind of eases you into a genre that you may not have tried before. And Crimson Clover, the graphics and the music are just top notch, and the gameplay is just perfect. So I'd highly recommend giving that kind of bullet hell game a go. And thanks for joining me, Bastich B at 64K. I hope you had a good time. And if you can please like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated. I'll see you next time. Cheers.